Maja will tell us something about her research, about social capital in shrinking cities. She has a presentation, so like we said yesterday, turn off our cameras and mute, so we can have a proper recording. Well, Maja, the floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, again. Thank you very much for having me again. I'm really happy to be here today, and today to tell you more something more about my own research. And I will now share the screen. I hope you can see this. Can you see this? Yes. Otherwise, let me know. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the research I did last few years. And very broadly, it was about social capital in the context of urban shrinkage. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but I'll go into it immediately. Yesterday, I told you something about I just wanted to mention that this research has also been part of a NIMED research agenda. And I won't bother you anymore with any other details about NIMED. You already know all of this and have been listening very good yesterday, I hope. So anyway, I started being interested in shrinking cities around 2010 or something. And you can imagine this was the time when this concept of shrinking cities was really just entering the academic agendas and actually policy agendas as well. Because nowadays we are really used to growth, growing economies, growing cities. So if you look at any newspaper or anything like that, you will always see this almost growth paradigm. We need to grow in order to maintain a quality of life. However, what I discovered when I started to look more into this topic is that there is the whole different world out there of so-called shrinking cities. And with shrinking city or shrinking urban area, as it's often called in the literature, I mean by that urban areas that are losing population, so declining in population, and also declining in economic activity. So less people and less economic activity, you can say. And it's quite shocking, really, if you look at the numbers, statistics behind this, you can see that actually something about 40% of European urban areas are shrinking or at some point in their development going through a process of shrinkage. So it's very widespread. For example, if you look at the population developments in Europe, then you can see the red spots, the really growing cities of urban areas, actually, of Madrid, London, Barcelona, you name it. But on the other hand, there are a lot of other smaller, usually small and medium-sized areas, urban areas, that are losing population. So this is very widespread because there is half of European population lives in this kind of area. So it's an issue that I really believe deserves some attention. These shrinking areas were a focus of my research, and I also wanted to look in a specific kind of shrinking urban areas or shrinking cities. And I wanted to focus on areas that were mono-industrial in the past, because these are the ones that in Northern and Western Europe are the most prominent in shrinking trajectories. So imagine areas such as Heerlen, for example, where we had mining industry, and then this disappeared. Or throughout Europe, you can find this kind of areas. I've decided to do a case study, and I think we have some partners from Wales, which is really nice. I love it. I chosen 2 cases of shrinking cities, of shrinking urban areas, which I investigated. One of them is Blaenau Gwent in Wales, wonderful area. And here you can see some photos of 1950s and 2016. So on the left one, you can see really very well developed high street with nice cars, shops, etc. And on the right side, the photo I took a few years ago when I was there collecting my data. A lot of vacancy, a lot of vacant shops, and the rain is accidental. It's not always raining there, but yeah, so very different pictures. So these areas are often the places that grew rapidly with the development of heavy industries such as steel and coal mining. For example, in Blaenau Gwent, it developed from small villages that were faced with rapid industrialization and explosive population and economic growth. So it was the place to be. It was not only a place where you could get a job, but also the best luxury goods in the country, the Hollywood movies were shown there, you name it. And what I found also very important for my research is the motto they had there, and this is valleys that build the world. So from these Welsh valleys, let's say, the steel went to Cardiff Harbour and then throughout the world. So they were very proud also of, still are, of these developments and what these areas meant for the global development, let's say. But nowadays, if you walk on one of these streets, you see many empty shops, many decayed buildings. And you could say even that with the closing of the industries, a little bit more gloomy times began. And Blaenau Gwent, if you look at the statistics, is now champion in all the wrong things: unemployment, poverty, low education levels, etc. My second case was Heerlen in the Netherlands, which was very comparable actually to Blaenau Gwent. That's also why I chose them. Also grew rapidly from several villages that then grew into one urban area, and due to mining industry. So it developed, and a few decades later, in the 70s, mines were closed, terminated, and similarly to Blaenau Gwent, this area was faced with many problems. And it is this kind of shrinking cities, this kind of areas that are giving headaches, particularly to policymakers. How do we maintain quality of life in these areas? And this is a very broad concept. So you can think about how do we maintain economic activity so people would have jobs and could provide for themselves? How do we deal with oversized infrastructure? How do we deal with vacant buildings, etc.? So these kind of questions were very prominent, still are in many of this area. But often it's also looked, how do we maintain quality of life in these areas? And this was also a focus of my research, because maintaining the quality of life in shrinking cities is an issue, because shrinking cities often struggle with very limited financial means or material resources. This means there's no money for maintaining the services, such as keeping the school open or football club running. These are some classic examples. In this respect, what we see is that policymakers often rely on people in shrinking cities, hoping that they will see what's going on in their environments and feel that they need to do something about it. And at the time I started this research on shrinking cities, knowledge on shrinkage was focused primarily on demographic, economic, and spatial planning issues. So much of this research was also conducted on policy level. So we didn't really know how people in shrinking cities experience shrinkage in their everyday life, and if they're prepared to do something about it. And this is why I decided to investigate this, because a lot of policy attention to people to do something, and at the same time, not really enough knowledge in, how do people experience this? What do they want to do about it? So therefore, I first looked into if people actually experience shrinkage. Do they see it? Do they think it's a problem? Or is it just a policy issue? And second, I also wanted to look into under what conditions people would be willing to take initiatives that would improve the environment. So therefore, I looked at their social capital. So are they prepared to do something about shrinking? Social capital was the key concept in my research, and I mean, for some of you that are familiar with this concept, you probably already know there are thousands of publications yearly. It has been applied to so many disciplines and questions, etc. So the interpretation of social capital is immense. There is no one way to define it. However, the way I used it in my research is the following. I looked at so-called non-material resources in a shrinking city. So as I said, shrinking cities struggle with the decline of material resources, such as buildings, roads, and other things we can see. However, we don't know much about other kinds of resources that are less visible. So people in these areas, what do they feel, think, and do? So I looked whether or not people trust their neighbors, municipalities, and governments. I also looked at place attachment, if people feel connected to the area, if they feel they belong there. And these are really important topics that were not really researched until now very much. Then I also looked into whether people participate in social activities with family and friends, but also more formal activities like sports clubs, schools, etc. So formal and informal participation. And finally, I examined empowerment, whether or not people feel they have a voice. Do they feel they can take action in developments that affect them in their area? And all of these sort of indicators I chose, they don't fall from the sky. They are also based, and they were reflected to shrinking cities literature. So all of this, were also placed in this literature. If you want to know more, you will have to read the book. There's a link at the end of the presentation how you can download it. So how do you then go about researching this? I don't want to bother you too much with my methodological approach. I mean, maybe you have some questions about this, or you can read more about it, but I just want to give you some really basics. I've chosen to look at 2 shrinking cities in 2 different countries as cases to explore. So as I said, Heerlen in the Netherlands and Blijno-Gwent in Wales. And these both are comparable because of their industrial history and current economic stagnation, similar size, predictions for shrinkage, so population decline in the future. I've interviewed many people in these cities in order to answer my research questions and came to interesting results. I will now only mention some most important ones because, we don't have time for everything. So I always find interesting to look at similarities and differences, and definitely I think in context of this meeting, this might be a good point to mention. When it comes to similarities, what I saw is that urban shrinkage is not experienced by people in these areas as something essentially threatening to their everyday life. However, people do see the problems. For example, people are worried about the weak economic situation in the city, such as vacant shops or few jobs. Also, in both cases, people told me about how troubled they are with the image that outsiders have about their city. Another similarity is that in both cases, I saw mistrust of people towards municipalities and governments. And this is maybe not so surprising. People often mistrust governments, but it was very, very clear and very outspoken. And this could possibly be explained with the way how industries were dismantled and quickly, and how they disappeared. People lost jobs and possibly felt let down by their governments. Also, in both cases, people feel very connected to the area, and particularly to informal networks such as family and close friends. So they're not so much involved in formal activities that some policymakers see as very useful, organizations, volunteering work, etc. But it would do no justice to people to say that they are not active, because in their informal networks they are very active, and very connected to the area. They're very proud of the area. This is a place where they grew up, where their families are, so they're very attached to it. And finally, some similarities are also that people in shrinking cities do not automatically jump into the gaps of disappearing companies and government. So the wishful thinking, if you wish, of governments that people will just see what's declining or disappearing and then pick it up themselves. This is not going to happen automatically. People don't feel immediately motivated to do this. What's also very interesting to look at, always, is differences. And this is why I really like international comparisons, because they really can give you a lot of reflection possibility for your research. So when it comes to differences, I saw there were differences in the way how people see responsibilities of various actors for urban shrinkage. For example, in Heerlen, I saw greater dependency on the local government, whereas in Blijno-Gwent, I observed more independent attitude. So people in Heerlen would look much more into, what can municipality do for me? It's municipality's responsibility. This kind of vocabulary was also sometimes present in my interviews in Blijno-Gwent, but by far not as much. People were more willing and ready to take things in their own hands. This can also maybe be explained by different historical backgrounds and the role of important institutions. A little bit more dependent behavior in here can be explained by the compliant attitudes of its inhabitants that was encouraged by the Catholic Church during the mining period. Whereas in Blijno-Gwent, trade unions were historically very strong, encouraging standing up for themselves. So differences in how people look at responsibilities for dealing with shrinkage can also be explained by different welfare state arrangements. A more elaborate welfare state in Heerlen implies the perception that the state holds more responsibilities and thus enables the greater reliance on the state. And more liberal approach in Blijno-Gwent puts more responsibility on the individual, and interviewees tend to rely more on the market than on the state for their well-being. So these are some differences that I've observed. Okay, so what do you conclude? So in my research, I looked at how people experience shrinkage and what can you learn on their social capital. And I found that people's interpretations of urban shrinkage are placed within everyday life and specific context. These offer more rich and more positive understandings of these places. I find this very important to mention because otherwise you get this idea about, oh, shrinkage is only a problem, these are not so good places to live in, etc. Whereas if you include people's perspective, you see that these are positive places that hold a lot of meanings for people. Social capital in the context of shrinking cities shows more resources such as place attachment and informal participation. So there are resources of social capital that can be recognized and possibly used. However, it definitely shouldn't be overrated. It's not a one size fits all, or the case that people will just, inhabitants of these cities will just jump in where other economic or municipal services disappeared. This is not going to happen. So the building of mutual trust is crucial. And in this respect, the new forms of cooperation among social, economic, and governmental actors are needed. So new ways of figuring out how do we do things in future. So for the long-term sustainable future of shrinking cities, it is crucial that the experience of people and their social capital are taken seriously. And I remember one of my interviewees in Blainau Gwent said, the future of every community lies in capturing the passion, intelligence, imagination, and resources of its people. So it's the people that hold the resources that can help these areas to transform further. And now just a quick concluding observations, which maybe are interesting, or I want to give to you as more reflection points. First, I want to say that I've noticed in my year-long research on shrinking cities or urban areas that are facing population and economic decline, that growth-oriented interpretation limits the understanding of shrinking areas. So if we only focus as growth is good and we need to grow, we really limit our interpretation on other things that are actually going really well in these areas, and also possibilities that these areas offer. And in order to do that, to reach this holistic view, it's really important to consider everyday life of its inhabitants in a specific context. So it's not only about policy measures, about statistics, numbers, but it's really important to look at how people interpret this, how is their everyday life going, let's say. What I also found is that collective identity is still so important for people in these areas. And people nowadays are also still very proud of how things were in the peak days of these areas, and also very bothered that it's not this way. So yeah, in every kind of action in these areas, you would have to also consider this collective identity that is based on industrialization, and how can you work with that. And for example, in Blainau Gwent, I also saw some industrial heritage that was maintained and used as identification point, and tourist point as well, for people to be able to be proud, to identify with this, and to recognize themselves and their histories in this. And yeah, one very general observation to conclude is that for sustainable future of shrinking areas, we really need to consider civil societies. So to plan a future and transformation of areas that struggle, let's put it that way, we can't do that behind a desk in some kind of a meeting room at the municipality. We really need to involve people, and that asks for new modes of working together, which I think you will also be hearing more about, some concrete projects and examples a little bit later today. Okay, and then I had also some recommendations. Which, not to repeat myself too much, I already said this. These were the recommendations for policymakers. Begin with the experience of citizens. So talk to people. How do they How do they experience the area? What do they see? What do they want? What do they need? Second, what I really want to emphasize in the areas where I've been in Kleine Gwent and Heerlen, I really saw the importance of key persons. So these are the sort of mediators in between people in civil society, inhabitants, and other actors, such as, for example, municipality or policymakers. These are really, really important. These can also be some kind of heroes in the communities or people that are recognized by others. It is very important to involve these persons when, as a policymaker, for example, if you are planning to conduct some intervention, etc. These are really great resources in this area. Another thing I recommended is to use experimentation when it comes to tackling issue in shrinking cities. We see also in here a lot of really interesting projects, initiatives, etc., that are very experimental, and the context of shrinkage almost like allows this experimentation. And in this way, it's you can break the circle, or you can allow for innovative thinking, maybe more so than in growing areas, because of the resources that we have. You can give vacant buildings to artists or whatever. Linda can tell you much more about this, but it's very important to do this, and it can provide a lot of a boost for these areas. And finally, as I already said, don't think that civic action or involvement of citizens will cover everything, and that people will just say, oh, okay, I will take things over now. This won't happen. So if you start with experience, if you start with everyday life of people, if you involve key persons, etc., you still need to renegotiate who is going to do what, and particularly, need to recognize that informal participation, intrinsic motivation of people as valuable, and don't expect miracles or things such as people in these areas, taking over government services or anything like that. So these are like years of research in 20 minutes or so. I hope I was pretty understandable, and I can imagine there are many questions. This link here, you can download the whole book, which consists of several papers, in which I go into more meticulous detail on each of these concepts and cases, etc., in case you are interested. So thank you for your attention. I will now stop sharing my screen, and I hope maybe you have some questions. I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. That was really excellent. That was a really interesting presentation. So thank you very much for that. I have a question or two, but I think there's some other questions that have come in. Chris, you have written a question. Do you want to come in and voice that yourself? I can read it out otherwise.
Happy to, Murray. Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting presentation, and excellent use of your research as well. I've got a very simple question. You used the word city, and I wonder whether that actually translates to town in the UK.
Yeah, it does.
Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely. This was a huge, actually in my book, I have the whole section on this, because city, these both areas, my case studies, Heerlen and Kleine Gwent, I wouldn't call them city. I would call Moscow a city, and in terms of also European classifications on what makes a city. So no, I wouldn't call them a city. However, in the European classifications of small and medium-sized towns, it goes up to something like 200,000. So they would be more classified as towns. However, in my research and my writing, I make this distinction clear, but I also often use shrinking cities because this is the academic literature, the field discourse in which I place my research. And in this respect, shrinking city is like container concept that is used to describe these developments. But that's a really good remark, because there is a huge difference there. So shrinking city more refers to the academic discourse that I place my research in, whereas if you look geographically, these areas would be classified as towns in both respective countries.
Just one follow-up comment, really, based on that. I say that because in the UK, the evidence is that cities which tend, I mean, a city in the UK is defined as having a cathedral, whatever that means. But they also, the large cities, Liverpool, Sheffield, they've all grown. But market towns have shrunk. And I absolutely recognise what you say regarding market towns and small towns, but cities have really, I mean, London has increased by 20%. Birmingham is growing. Manchester has grown exponentially.
It's the winners and losers,
Absolutely. Interestingly, just as a postscript, post-CV, there's evidence now that people want to move out of very big cities back into smaller towns.
Of course. I wonder what's that going to do, indeed. Yeah. It gives you, indeed, more room or bigger house and a nice green area. Yeah. This would be really interesting follow-up research. Alex Stevens, I see a hand.
Hi. So we're from Merthyr Tydfil, which
yes, you are from Merthyr, yeah.
Just across the way from Blaen y Gwent. So Blaen y Gwent, we share many of the same issues that Blaen y Gwent has. We are, just by geographical reason, we're on some fault lines of sort of major roads, etc. So we're that bit further ahead or that much better off, But yeah, I certainly recognise the rainy street in Blaen y Gwent.
Sorry, I didn't want to be I also could have included some beautiful pictures of the Welsh valleys. This is an amazing area. I hope I can go back soon.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say you were only there for 6 months. So you didn't get a sunny day. Sorry.
Oh, no. I got. Oh yeah.
So, I guess my observation is twofold. I guess where the valleys, when you're talking about cities, and taking on board the conversation that you just had with Chris, but we've got a city region now. So the big generator is Cardiff.
Yes.
It's drawing down people, so Blaen y Gwent is going to be a little bit more of a dormitory town, or a place, as Chris was alluding to there. People don't necessarily want to live in the city; they want to live out there, and obviously prices are a lot lower. The challenge to us as a municipality, as a local authority, is going to be, how do we get the receipts? How do we get the council taxes, etc., to be able to deliver on the services that people get? I'm not really expecting for you to go, I've got exactly the solution. But I was just wondering that, in terms of Herlene and Blaen y Gwent, you mentioned about innovation, etc., but you also say, don't expect the civic actors to suddenly just go, don't worry, we'll take care of collecting the bins, etc.
That is very important, but indeed the question I can't really answer. What I can say indeed is there are possibilities, resources within civic action, but also limitations, and the possibility of people collecting the bins themselves, yeah, that's not going to happen. Put it that way. And this is really problematic. There are a lot of councils, dealing with shortages, etc. So, but this was a little bit out of the scope of my my research. So unfortunately, I don't have answer to how to deal with that. However, some other services, you can really mobilize the community. In terms of, I have noticed, for example, in Blajnoget, libraries were very important, places where people meet for all kinds of things. It's crazy. I mean, it was really interesting for me to see. Also, small impulses, they're very engaged there to with Blajnoget Effect project to, for example, kickstart small businesses, individuals working on their business. So all of those kind of things help a little bit in the end, I guess.
Did you meet with Mo?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God, what a small world, huh? Say hi if you see him.
I will do.
He was very helpful.
Yes. Yeah, good guy. Thank you.
So another following future research question.
Yeah, and of course, some of the stuff that Effect does is kind of the things that SuNSE is looking to do as well. But as you said, when you're looking for people to take up some of these challenges, a good example has been the recent health crisis and how many of our social enterprises and the charity sector have stepped in to deliver food and any number of different actions.
And you really see the energy in the communities when it's around a common goal or intrinsic motivation or whatever. And it's interesting also that you mentioned Mo, for example. This is exactly what I talk about when it comes to these key persons, people that are recognized in the community, that are easy to talk to, that everybody can find, and then by doing that and supporting people, you really give these small impulses, and this is to the whole area. And this is really the only way you can boost it, I believe. So your SuNSE project is also really interesting in this respect, in terms of looking at this entrepreneurship and what can you achieve with that, step by step.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for?
Yes.
Maja?
Sorry, my micro is already open. Sorry. Yes. Actually, yes, it's a fascinating subject, really, because it has to do with the collective representations we have of ourselves. So I don't really have a question, but is there such a thing as a collective representations of people have of themselves? As a shrinking city, is the shrinking city a good concept? And yes, and then I think it's another remark is it's very modern subject, because it's also about our future to every of us. It's about, you said it, about sustainability, because we are a shrinking continent. So maybe these shrinking areas are at the forefront of what will happen. So that's just a remark, maybe, and also what is your view on also integrating entrepreneurs and your view of our project, integrating more the economic side, the enterprise, and so on? How, because you focus on citizens, what would be, I don't know, your view on that, on integrating broader stakeholders and.
That's a good point. Thank you. This questions of collective identity, etc. we can talk about, and there's certainly some things people share in terms of how they look at the area and the cells, but also very, very individual in a way how they define their what they identify with. But you can read more in the book about that. As I said about your second point, I think it's really important to to support this entrepreneurship of people based on their intrinsic motivation, because this can really, recognize this not very visible resources always and really give impulse. Maybe not so much in huge economic advantages few years down the road or something like that, but really in quality of life and how people perceive this in their area. Like we see in some small projects in Heerlen that I think Kelly or Linda will tell you more about. So this is not giving jobs to so many people, etc. But it's really small impulse to improve how people feel about the area. So I really think this is important. And what my point of view is sometimes not so clear whether it's entrepreneurship. What's in a word? How do you define it? Because also taking care of the area around your house, or making little activities to cook together and then sell this food or something like that. This can also be seen in between civil society and entrepreneurship. And it's really important to cherish this kind of sometimes maybe strange combinations and see how does it work for inhabitants? Do they like it? Do they benefit from it, etc.? So that's why I think it's really good that you have this project and then also share, please, your findings.
Thank you, and some good questions. Does anyone else have a question for Maja? I can maybe just come in with one. It's possibly sort of more connected to the your research is excellent, and it really shows some interesting it makes some interesting observations. I guess from my point of view, town or city, there's always individuals who are keen to come forward with ideas. There's always people that are empowered, or some people that are empowered or feel empowered to come forward with suggestions about how they can improve their city, reuse space, take up assets that could become community assets and so forth. And Scotland's quite good at that, because it does a fair amount of encouraging people to buy back public assets and so forth, and provide funding for that one. But in our experience, and I don't know how much your research covered this bit about, how do you, there's always people that come forward, but how do you get the other people? How do you, other projects that have successfully managed to, I'm finding it difficult to explain this, to empower as many people as possible, the ones who wouldn't ordinarily come forward? I think if you work in a community, there's always one or two people that would be involved in everything. That can often put others off. And they seem to think, well, this is our project, we don't want anybody involved in this one. Whereas you're trying to harness as many ideas as possible to tell as many people in the community, this is yours, all come forward. How do you encourage and empower everyone, or raise expectations for everyone, get that balance?
Very, very good point, this. And indeed, as you can, we all know specific people, and these will always react, this will always do something. However, you never reach everybody. But what I've heard in my interviews is that people do want to share their opinion, that people do want to do something, provided it's something that's close to their everyday life, that's something that they care about. And how do you do this? I maybe I'm going to be a little bit harsh now, but I think sometimes for policymakers or social workers, etc., it's a little bit easier to approach the ones that they know already, that are very vocal, etc. But it's also a question of stepping a little bit outside of your secure way of doing things. And sometimes if you want to reach young people, you need to go to their place where they hang around in the evening or something, or elderly, you need to maybe go to their houses, etc. You can't just make a meeting and expect people will show up. So that's what I want to say, close to their everyday life, but also critically look at how do we try to engage people and step out of our comfort zone in order to come closer to them, because people, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people will be prepared to talk to you, to do something, to share, etc. So that's the one thing that we really see, and it keeps repeating itself. We cannot access people, they don't show up to the meetings. I mean, like, don't even bother, they won't anyway. But the second thing, again, is really finding these people of trust in the communities, like I already said, and I think Linda and Kelly will say more about this. People that can link people with each other, and they can say to the municipality, for example, oh, there are some ideas there, let's try to support them with this, etc. And trust, and that's also central and social capital, is here also really central. So these are like bridges, these people are like bridges between different actors, and can also find them in the community, can talk to them in their own language without using difficult stuff sometimes, difficult words. So these two things, I think, would be, yeah, what you can try. And it's not, I mean, I would say it's not difficult, but it takes time and patience, and yeah, it's not always like, oh, we need a project team by next Monday. Yeah, those kind of things are then more difficult to engage in.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if Linda's on the call still. I can't see her name here, but are you there, Linda?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of the time, and I'm conscious that people might want to have a short break before the meeting, for the PSG meeting in 15 minutes. But and I'm not sure if anybody has any other questions. Maybe we'll have time for one further question from anyone. Otherwise, from my own point of view, and I think from the rest of the members here today, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you for that. Very thought-provoking, very interesting.
Thank you for having me, and please let me know if you have any more questions. The book and the link is there for free download, so yeah, feel free to do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye-bye.